Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome back to myself. I was at Vince's funeral last week, so we set off on the Wednesday. So I just couldn't make the stream. But yeah, good send off for Vince. Doesn't believe in voting, but he believes in me. And he even took us out last year leafleting down in South Gloucester in Callum's ward where he ran, and obviously Callum came up with a fantastic result of over 200 votes for his first election. So that was Vince last week. But yeah, we had a good service and that the camp, good chat. Met up with quite a few people, but anyway, I'm back. But our legendary panel's back tonight, back together. The three that make one, which is myself, Pat McGinnis, and the mighty Paul Rimmer. And tonight we're going on about, if you could view the thumbnail, conscription, that one of the top army generals mentioned, although our government say it's not likely that it's going to be any kind of forced conscription. But as you can see, World War III, we've had threats from all over the place. These globalists are saying because the war in Russia's not over yet, we've got to put more money and fight more and more war. Obviously, we've got the issues in the Middle East as well. What is going to happen? So, Pat, what's going to happen?
Well, I see this as a desperate situation for the globalists because, you know, all over Europe, the populist, right-wing parties are gaining ground, significant ground, and especially in France. And it's quite a coincidence that Macron came out and said, we need to, France needs to send troops to fight Russia and Ukraine and stuff like this, because the way I see it is what they're thinking is the only way out of it, stop National Rally getting into power, would be to get involved with this war, and it would be a national emergency, and they could bring out powers to stop elections, and then the dreaded conscription, the draft. I mean, the word conscription, that really means to most people that you're going to do a conscription into an active war. There's an active war going on, and they're going to forcibly tell all the fighting age men. And let's be honest, because we live in a liberal, wokey-cokey democracy, surely they're going to conscript all the women as well, 18 to 35s. So that's what they're going to try and do, I think. But I think I don't think it's going to work because it's very different today. So many more people have got information to so many different things, whereas years ago in the First World War, the only kind of information you'd get would be from the local reg, the national reg, and but now everyone can get on the internet, and I don't think many people are going to willingly go to war for this war against Russia, because not only has Macron come out and said that, they're also talking about it in this country. Multiple big politicians have spoke about going to war, and we're going to have to do a conscription. So I think the powers that be are becoming desperate. The Tory party know they're on their last legs. The Reform's going to eat them up. The Labour Party is going to be eaten up by the Workers' Party, GB. And the National Housing Party is going to come round the back and take power. Yeah, I mean, it's not funny really, because when the powers that be get desperate, they will be willing to sacrifice millions and millions of lives, and we all don't want that. And a lot of people have said to me that they would go to prison and they wouldn't fight for this globalist regime which is running our country at the moment.
1989. Do you remember that year? The Berlin Wall came down, and a guy called Fukuyama said, "This is the end of history. The West has won." And we were expecting this great peace dividend. And Then we ended up with 9/11. And then something happened in 2020, which has really unhinged the whole world. And that was the steal of the American presidential election. You know, Joe Biden, he was put into office. He was placed into office. He lost that election by a landslide. They had millions of ballots with no chain of ownership. They changed all the voting laws in the marginal states. And they made this guy, this clown, this deadhead, president of America, which means leader of the free world. And all the nations on the earth, the Chinese, the Indians, the Islamic world, especially the Israelis, they looked at this and thought, that's the end of the Great Republic. Something's happened here. America has lost its legitimacy and it's lost its influence. It no longer can claim to stand for the rule of law. It no longer can claim to stand for democracy because it has stole the election for the president. Biden was appointed. He wasn't elected. And Trump, the legitimate winner, he's tried to stigmatize him now as a criminal. There's 91 investigations into him, indictments, bogus crimes. It's like something out of Stalin's Russia. It's just partisan political lawfare. It's crazy what's happening in America. And this has caused the whole world order to crumble in a sense. And we saw this most notably in the Ukraine when Biden told the Ukraine to join NATO. Putin said, "You're not bringing NATO forces to the border of Russia. That's not going to happen." And of course, Putin went in. It was called a special military operation. It wasn't an all-out invasion. He took over various provinces where the Russians were already the majority in these provinces, the Donbass, Luhansk, Crimea. And it looked like he was going to be contained, though. Ukrainian army, financed by America, supplied by America and the Europeans, trained by the British and the Poles. It would seem to be a force, capable of holding the Russians. I mean, it was only in July last year that the American CIA and Biden were proclaiming that Ukraine were on the verge of victory. And they were about to launch a massive summer offensive to sweep the Russians out of the Ukraine. And they were saying they not only want the Donbass back and Luhansk, they want the Crimea as well. They thought they could give the Russians one heck of a kicking. But it never worked out that way. The Russians stopped the spring summer offensive and basically turned it around. They captured the big fortress at Avdiivka, and they're pushing now. The Russians are pushing right across the front. They're claiming territory, and the Ukrainians are crumbling. In fact, most people now believe the Ukrainians are a defeated army. They sacrificed hundreds of thousands of soldiers in that spring and summer offensive. They were chasing them into minefields. They were being blown up left, right, and centre. The Russian military has moved up the gears. It's now gone from second to third gear. It's got these hypersonic missiles. They're just destroying the Patriot missiles. They're destroying the HIMARS. I mean, they've got all these drones now. There's thousands of drones. They can see everything that's happening. And they seem to have taken control on the Ukrainian front. And I think there's going to be, you don't know what the Russians are going to do. They never tell you in advance. The Ukrainians say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Nothing ever happens. The Russians just make surprise attacks now. But if I was to anticipate this, I think now that Putin's been re-elected, he's got popular support, and he's got 1 million troops now stationed in the Ukraine and on the borders of the Ukraine, I can foresee a real offensive coming from Russia, which will penetrate the Ukrainian lines, push them back to the Dnieper River. They want to take Odessa and link up with Transnistria from the Romanian border. They may even go for the Kiev. And this will really set the alarm bells ringing in every capital city in Europe. The Russians are coming. And don't forget, there's a lot of Westerners have moved into Ukraine to help their war effort. And they may be trapped by any Russian counteroffensive. You won't be able to get out of the Ukraine. There's going to be chaos. There could be millions of Ukrainians moving west to get out of the Ukraine, to get away from the Russian offensive. They may be pouring into Poland, Romania, and then coming into Western Europe. You know, we could get another huge flood of refugees. So there is definitely, I think it's almost a probability that in the summer, we're going to enter a crisis here now, a new European crisis. And we've already seen Macron's response that he is willing to send the French army into the Ukraine, which could provoke a nuclear war, but it will probably just provoke the hammering of the French army. The Germans and the Poles called them to Berlin and said, look, we're not sending our troops into the Ukraine. We don't want a war with Russia. And Macron said, well, you're not going to be able to avoid it. They're coming west, they're coming for us. And Scholz and Tusk said, no, let's see where they go. We don't think they'll come the whole way. But there's panic. There is panic in the West amongst these globalists. Macron, Olaf Scholz, Donald Tusk in Poland, and of course, most of all, the Democrats. The Americans have poured hundreds of billions of dollars into the Ukraine. BlackRock have bought up huge chunks of the Ukraine. It's a massive investment that they made. They want to invest more there. And they don't want to see all this money go up in smoke. So they're thinking, how are we going to stop Russia? I mean, it's Winston Churchill said that Russia is an enigma wrapped inside a puzzle. No one can understand Russia. And the West have certainly failed to understand Russia because they thought Russia was beat. They thought Putin would crumble. They thought they could have a color revolution in Moscow and overthrow the Putin regime. And he set up like a pro-Western regime in Moscow. It was all fantasy. But the reality is now dawning that we could be on the edge of a Russian offensive. Now, it seems surreal. We've never known real all-out war against two equal opponents. We've known like these asymmetrical wars in the Middle East, but the idea that somehow a major force is about to invade Europe absolutely terrifies the people of Europe. Now, the globalist leaders are saying we've got to build up our military capability in the West. We need to expand our armies. We need to put more money into our military. Denmark have reintroduced conscription. Germany are talking about reintroducing conscription. Scandinavian countries. There's no Western lads volunteering to join the Western armies. The Western lads don't want to know. What are they going to die for? These woke regimes, which are bringing in millions of immigrants to replace them. People who are telling them that any sign of patriotism is far right or Nazism. People who are telling them that being white is somehow a type of crime that you've got to apologize for. They're not going to fight for these people. The Western youth, they say, oh, they're not patriotic. There's nothing to be patriotic for. Oh, yeah, the old Europe, which represented the people and gave the people opportunities, great. But the new Europe that we see now, which is controlled by the Zionist elite, the globalist Zionist elite, no one's going to fight for that. The same in the States. When they're saying in America there's military recruitment is up, but what they're recruiting is girls, and mainly from the black ghettos. This is who are now populating the American army. It's crazy. These people are not going to go on the front line and fight against hardened Russian forces, well equipped with all the latest equipment. They got no chance. Pat just talked about conscripting women. Women cannot fight on the front line in modern warfare. The explosions of shells and missiles and bullets, it wrecks their nervous system very quickly. Men can only just endure it. They tried to put women on the front line in Ukraine, and they all had nervous breakdowns within hours. It's absolutely crazy. But this surreal notion that a war may be coming to Europe is almost an immediate reality. It could be coming to Europe. There is a war in Europe. There's a war in Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. The Russians have souped up their military now to such an extent that they're capable of taking on the Americans. And this is what is terrifying everybody. The Americans used to rule the roost, the hyperpower, they're now a joke. I go back to this stolen election. They've lost legitimacy. So we're in this quagmire now. And the politicians, the idiots, the grand chaps of this world, the Macrons, and are saying we have to introduce conscription. And that's where the fun begins. Because when you saw the truckers rise in Canada against all, and COVID is part of this, against these COVID, these COVID measures, the Ottawa government panicked and had to surrender in the end. People power. Because I believe when they start to introduce conscription, the people will rebel. It'll be like the Easter Rising in Ireland all over again, 1916, because that was about the British trying to conscript the Irish to go and fight in the First World War. People will not fight in a war they don't believe in, and no one believes in this war. And I don't believe that they can push the necessary propaganda to brainwash us to fight. What do you think, John?
Well, like I said at the beginning, that was said by an army general, but someone in the government said they're not going to be forcing anyone to join, but they never said that they're not going to do it. So you're right, they never said they're not going to do it. And, you were saying then that Britain's changed. We have so many different kinds of people here who hate everything to do with Britain. They're not going to go to war for us. They're not going to support Britain. If we have an interest like we had in the Falklands, nobody's going to support that here. There's only like the ones who love Britain is going to support something like that, but we're not. But it's very difficult. Everyone will say that all this war makes money, and I 100% agree. But it's very difficult, and I've done videos on this because we have Israeli arms companies in the UK making chipboards for circuit boards for missiles, and one of them was in Oldham, and it was a factory run by a company called iBit, and the Ferranti technology has been around since the 50s, and the UK were world leaders in this kind of technology. Ferranti's in Oldham ended up making the circuit boards and the dashboards for the GR Tornado. I've talked about this in a lot of my videos. And there was 1,000 people at that factory, and they shut it down. So, there is a cost to this no more selling arms. And I agree, I don't want to sell arms to Israel. I don't want to sell arms to the Middle East. But throughout the war and the Cold War, that was one of Britain's things that we got money for, was arms sales. You know what I mean? We have to look at the technology drive and stuff like that, and jet fighters, and we was a pinnacle, and then we ended up making the Harrier jump jet, which is still used today, even though it was first designed in the 60s. An amazing technology, but like I said, there's consequences. So 1,000 jobs went at that mill. 1,000 jobs. No, these lefties weren't bothered putting that area into poverty. And this mill has been a long-standing mill doing the same thing. And, 1,000 people have gone, I don't want war, but I've got to think about the people of Oldham. Got to think about how they're going to live. We're already in a poverty town. But, this war thing, it does make money for the right people. We know that. And there is links with Ukraine, all the corruption, the corrupt money, the laundered money going through Ukraine from big people in America. It's alleged Biden and his son have dealings with it also. They want this war. They want more war, don't they? But, I don't. But there's difficulties. We've got to weigh things up on both sides, I think. And when the lefties were trying to shut down the iBit factory, I went down a couple of times talking to people in the area and stuff like that. And, one woman said, it's always going on this. And my husband works here, and sometimes he just don't know whether he's going to have a job the next day. It's what she said. You know what I mean? And this is someone who lives local, so I've got to think about my local people. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be ignorant of what's going on. But again, I talked about all this months and months ago, over a year ago, when they were doing the protests at the iBit, and they carried that kind of protesting all over the country. But, obviously, Israel, well, if we take over these factories you make for us, we'll be giving your people jobs and we'll be buying all these chipboards. I just don't want that. Can't stand it happening. There's 101 people in the chat, by the way, which is really good for a Tuesday night stream. I'm just going to go to the chat. A lot of people in. Dave 101, Peter Smithson, Tommy Trump, sometimes Sue. I haven't seen our Craig yet. I hope you're coming on, Craig, or I hope you're watching, and I hope you're all right, my man. I've got a little note here to make sure that I buddy check people and make sure people are all right through the veteran show, which I will be doing. Sergeant Furry Toes, but yeah, there's a lot behind it, and we've got to weigh up stuff. And like I said, the UK has been prominent in these kind of weapons buildings for years, and stuff like that. And I know they don't want to get rid of it, but they got rid of everything else. So we'll have to make weapons now. There's no coal, there's no steel, there's no nothing. Our big industries have been shut down. And if we go to not selling weapons, I wonder how quick the UK will just become poor and a third world country. Maybe this is what they want us to do. They want to drain all our money off us. That's what I always feel like. Everybody else around the world, every other kind of group, the World Economic Forum, the EU, everyone, all they want to do is suck us dry here in England, no matter how they want to do it, even if it means making war and sucking us dry that way. They do, and it's wrong. And, a lot of people are just not going to fight for British values, not like we had in World War II. And as you know, I met Alfie, a 98-year-old veteran who lied about his age to get into the army. That's how he wanted to. And I did a little interview with him, and he said, I wanted to support and protect my country. That's what he said. And we just don't have that kind of people here these days. Some of them will be going in army, and they might think they want to protect us, but on the battlefield, we'll have to call them pronouns and stuff like that. And then the sergeant major is going to have to call them pronouns and then let somebody pray in the middle of a battlefield. I've seen that advertisement. That, what I mean? That these things are mad. And, I'm not having a go at women in general. Women are not soldiers. More men die in warfare than any other kind of person in any other kind of class in history. It's always been men. Men are physically built for war. Men are 15 to 20% bigger than a normal woman. I'm not saying every woman can't do it. There is some specialists, and there is some women who are in the armed forces. But like the police, it's a man thing. I'm sorry, especially on the front line. And I don't know if people have carried the packs of equipment that they have to carry. When we used to do, as teenagers, we went on, we had an army training place up here, and they put these packs on us and say you'd have to do 10 miles with that pack on, and, and stuff like that. And I'm like, what? And, I'm a man. But yeah, it's not a thing for women. And you have to conscript women. It must mean how desperate they are. And like Paul said, the kind of mental effects and things like that on people who aren't built for war is extraordinary. And if you put all these women into war, you can expect that when they come back, we'll have to look after them all. They'll be pretty well messed up in their heads and stuff like that. But, I just don't know, me. Obviously, I don't want war, but there's jobs. Like I said, there's 1,000 jobs at iBit Factory. No one's talking about these jobs. I didn't hear on Lefty, I didn't hear anybody in the government talk about jobs that are going, talk about the 1,000 jobs that went in Oldham. Nobody said nothing. I'm saying it. No one else will. Not one of our council members will say it. No one's bothered about them 1,000 jobs. Well, I am bothered about them. I am bothered about the people employed at that mill. I talked to the woman who said her husband don't know whether he's going to have a job the next day and stuff like that. I'm bothered. So there's got to be a lot of things that we've got to weigh up.
What you got to realise with this, John, is that, you see, since the Second World War, we fought in some sort of bizarre wars, like the Gulf War, the Vietnam War, and, the Afghan War. And we weren't fighting an enemy that could really damage us, But what we face now, it's not only Russia, it's Russia and China and the Islamic world, Iran, together. China have already said if NATO attacks Russia, China will come in on the side of Russia. China is now really the biggest economy in the world. It's certainly the biggest manufacturer. They can make shells and military equipment on a greater scale than any other nation on earth now. And we're finding out that a lot of these supposedly outstanding American equipment, like the Abraham tanks and the Patriotic missile systems, actually are not that good at all. The Russians have smashed them. So we're not facing this time an asymmetrical warfare where a big, strong West against a little third world nation. We're facing the Eurasian alliance, which is capable of whooping the Europeans and the Americans. And this is why there is panic, because there is a fear. I mean, Macron said, if we lose in the Ukraine, this is a humiliation for Europe. This means our prestige and our power in the world is over. It could mean the end of the dominance of the dollar. It could actually bring down the American empire, because all these countries like India and the Muslim world and the Latin American countries, they have no respect for America anymore. They're looking at America and saying it's rotten to the core. And they're looking to Russia now, and they're looking to China as world leaders. And that means the prestige and the money flows to these countries. This is why they're panicking. I mean, Macron kept banging the table, said, I'm the president of France. I can do what I want. The truth is, no one cares who's the president of France. France is a no-mark nation now. France is a joke. I mean, you just talked about our military past and our military manufacturing, John. Britain has a fantastic military history, but our military is a joke now, apart from the specialist forces. Maybe the Royal Marines, the paratroopers, the green jackets, a few infantry regiments, through speciality. Our intelligence is top whack, but we haven't got the forces. There are less than 40,000 infantrymen in the British Army now. It's nowhere near enough. Russia's got over 1 million troops in the Ukraine. The asymmetrical warfare this time will be turned against the West. That's why they will need conscription, and they will push up the propaganda. They will push up the legal controls. They'll destroy the internet if they need to, because they need an army. They need an army, because without an army, they have no prestige. Without any prestige, our economies will go, and the leaders of the West, the globalists, this is the problem. These wars are essentially for one group of people, Israel. We want no more wars for Israel. Pat?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting what you said earlier, Paul, about the election in America. And I think you could be right. It's a massive signal to the rest of the world that it's over. The so-called democracy in America, which was the leader of the so-called free world, as it's in trouble and it's defunct. It's not working properly now. And not only have we got what's going on in Ukraine, I think that Israel have also taken the opportunity. I think Israel are panicking, and that is why they've created this whole thing in Gaza, because they're worried that the American power is slowly receding now. And it's a big thing what's happening, because you've got Iran involved as well, and you've got the BRICS: Iran, Russia, China, India. India's kind of on both sides, but Iran, China, Russia on one side, and then you've got the West on the other with Israel. And we don't support Israel, but for NATO, the globalists, they're with Israel. And Israel, I think that they planned this thing for a long time, and they're executing their ethnic cleansing. They're going to take that land. And even recently, someone said, "Oh, we're going to take in 2 million Palestinian refugees into the UK." It's just outrageous that they can even say that. But it's all looking like it's coming to a head, and this is why they're talking about conscription, and this is what this stream is about. And Macron was parachuted in to stop National Rally get to power, because National Rally Marine Le Pen had successfully taken out of the game the equivalent to the Tory party and the Labour Party in this country. And they had to parachute Macron in, and it worked. It's worked for a certain amount of time. just about worked the second time, but I think they know now that the next general election in France, National Rally are going to win it. And not only that, you know, even before this scandal kind of erupted around Macron's wife, if it is a wife, you know, National Rally were like, I think it was like Macron's party was on 22 points and National Rally was on 38, like nearly double in the lead. And then this thing has erupted around Macron's wife, who's supposed to be an ex-Rothschilds banker, really high up in the Rothschilds connections. And you know, apparently, like, Bridget is the one running the show, and it's so messed up. The whole thing is coming crashing down before our eyes, and it's dangerous times because this conscription, people don't realise. Somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, the English won't sign up for that." I said, "You don't understand. It's not a case of signing up. They will drive around in lorries and drag you out of your house and throw you in the lorry to take you to the army camp." And that's what conscription means, and to go off to fight wars. And if you don't, you go to prison. So, you know, a lot of people will probably go to prison. I personally wouldn't fight for this NATO regime. So yeah, it's very interesting times. And you know, I even said it on the doorstep tonight. I've been out knocking on doors tonight, and I said to someone, I said, you know, we're very close. You know, all across Europe, these populist parties are about to get into power, and we could see a dictatorship arise, not from the right, from the left, to stop it, you know, because they know that they're losing control. And you know, we could end, like, especially in this country, because the Tory party, they're finished. And but the thing is, I think the Reform Party, they're going to be allowed to fill that vacuum from the Tory party. They're just another establishment party. So it's all to play for, and this is what the National Housing Party are here for, to push the authorities all the way to the edge. You know, I mean, we just got to stand in elections. I know we're a small party, but, you know, please come forward if you want to stand in elections. Come and join our party. Go to our website, nationalhousingparty.uk. Join the party, £22 a year. Even better, if you want to stand in elections, get in contact with us, because you go out knocking on doors and people are so happy to speak to a new party. I'm knocking on doors every week, and it's literally like taking candy off a baby. That's, you know, not everyone agrees, but I'd say about, you know, 75% of the people I speak to, they're going to vote for me. And, you know, I'm classed as quite and, you know, quite a radical kind of message, you know, but it obviously isn't, because 75% of the people I'm speaking to, they're saying, where do I sign? I said, well, unfortunately, it's not for another 2 years, but I've got to start early because I've got a massive mountain to climb, but I'm going to climb it. Over to you, John.
Thank you, everyone in the chat. 144 on. I don't know if YouTube have let me have a bit more freedom these days, because it doesn't normally go up that fast. But thank you very much to everyone in the chat. Interesting stuff said. A lot of us are past the age and stuff like that of being conscripted. Sorry, I just had a call then, but sorry, I just stopped it. But yeah, very interesting times. And Trump's been having interviews with Farage, and he mentioned NATO. He mentioned how much money the US put into NATO compared to other countries, and he's not having it. And he said this when he was president before. And do I think he'll make a difference coming in to the world climate now and all this war? Certainly. I don't know what he's going to do in the Middle East, but I think that he could stop the Ukraine war. But I don't know what he'll do in the Middle East, because he supports Israel. So that means just continue with their war. But, you know, it's wrong. We shouldn't be doing any of this. And it's not that I'm a pacifist. I just don't believe that we need to do wars to sort things out these days. That's like things you did in the barbarian days and stuff like that. But, you know, the climate for people wanting to join the UK forces is just not there. It's not there now. We're not in the 1950s. And stuff like that, where men wanted to join, real men. We're not in that. We don't even have a quarter of our men are not even real men, you know. So it's gone way too far. And obviously, one of the things we haven't discussed, and this is pretty important, is the RAF was forced to recruit more non-white people, even when they had lesser qualifications. So all that means is if we do go into a war, these people aren't going to be able to use a gun. They're just going to be stupid. We're going to have stupid people not fit for the position that they go in, going into these wars. We're going to have sergeants and that who tick a box because it's a colour, pronoun, or whatever, or ethnicity.
Sexuality.
Yeah, but they can't do the job properly because they're not the right kind of people. And this is
You know what you talked about conscription then, John? In the Ukraine, the conscripted men up to the age of 50. So in the old days, conscription stopped when you're about 24. Now they're pushing it right up to the age of 50. Now, as far as war goes, there's an old saying, an ancient saying, only the dead have seen the end of war. Only the dead. War is part of the human condition. Tribes fight, nations fight, ideologies fight, men fight. We've been convinced that somehow no one's going to fight anymore. That's not the reality. The reality is we have peace because the Americans and NATO were so strong and so well respected that nobody would challenge them. The problem is with all this woke ideology, nobody respects the West anymore. The West now stands for abortion, the murder of preborn children. It's anti-Christian. The West stands for sodomy and sexual perversity. This is why the Islamic world and the Russians and the Chinese despise us now. They know what we stand for. We stand for what is woke, and they see that as a joke. And they won't listen to us anymore. They won't respect us anymore. They won't defer to us anymore. You can go along all these woke highways, transgenderism and all this sort of nonsense, drug abuse and sexual perversity and the breakdown of the family, and you can go along all these avenues and think, oh, it's great to have this personal freedom, but the real world says you're weak, you're pathetic, you're immoral, you've got no moral strength, and we're not going to listen to you, we're not going to respect you. And what you'll end up doing, as we saw in 2020 with the presidential election, you'll end up being cheats and liars and thieves. Now, the elite that run us now, the globalist elite, the globalist Zionist elite, this is exactly what they are. They're degenerates, and they're seeking to destroy our nations from within. Now, because they face a real enemy, because the truth never goes away. The real enemy is back now. Russia, China, Iran, the whole Islamic world. And they're looking at the West and saying, we can take these guys. We've got nothing to fear. And this is why they're going to make one desperate last attempt to defend what they've created, the Zionists. Now, I fear not only conscription, and we're going to have to talk now about how we form an alliance to stop conscription. These people use nuclear weapons. I mean, they reckon the assassination of Jack Kennedy in America was because he wanted to stop the Israelis getting a nuclear bomb. And that's why the Israelis took him out. Now, they will stop at nothing to promote their interest. And they don't care what level of slaughter that entails. We've seen the First World War. We've seen the Second World War. How are we going to stop them mobilizing our nations to fight the Third World War against the Eurasian powerhouses? Now, Pat just talked about the National Housing Party. We need political organizations that can campaign to educate people and mobilize people to stand against this globalist onslaught, to stand up for their communities, their families, and our nation, and defend us from this madness. I talked about the Easter Rising in 1916. That was the IRA, wasn't it? They stood up against the might of the British Empire on this one issue of conscription. You're not going to conscript Irishmen to fight in the First World War and throw them on the trenches, put them in the trenches. We're not facing German machine guns. It's as simple as that. We're not giving our lives for you. Our lives are precious. and we'll sacrifice them when we see necessary, not when you tell us. Now, we talk George Galloway, no to NATO. This is a powerful message that he's been putting out, and it's a message that I support completely. Now, Nick Griffin, of course, has also espoused this, no to NATO. We espouse it. We're not going to fight any more wars for Israel. Not only no to NATO, no to conscription. And we need an even broader alliance, bringing in the moderates, bringing in all sensible people, bringing in mothers, bringing in fathers, bringing in the lads themselves who are going to face conscription. And as Pat said, the lassies. We're going to have to mobilise and get organised like the truckers did in Canada against the Trudeau government. They would not take the COVID mandate. No, we're not doing it. We need to have that defiance. I think if they attempt to bring in conscription, we've got to fight it tooth and nail. They'll do it surreptitiously at first. They'll sort of bring it into schools and start educating kids to join the military, pushing propaganda. But, you know, it's going to start in Europe, isn't it? It's going to start. It's already started. We've seen, as I say, it started in Scandinavian countries. We need resistance. And it's going to be the nationalist populist parties. Like Pat said, the National Rally, Germany, the Alternative for Deutschland, Spain, the Vox Party. We have got to be the voice of this country which says no to war, no to conscription, no to these globalist elites using us. Because that's all they've done right through history. You see, you've got to remember, war is mass murder. The First World War was the mass murder of the youth of Europe. Not in our interest. They got Palestine, didn't they? They got the Jewish homeland in Palestine. The Second World War was the mass murder of the youth in Europe. Not in our interest. They got the State of Israel. The Third World War is them defending what they own already and pushing it further. We cannot allow our youth. We haven't got, our precious youth has been decimated by mass abortion anyway, but we can't afford a war where our youth are going to be slaughtered. We need a broad campaign to say no to NATO and stop this madness. Pat?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I think we do have to put our differences aside when it comes to people like Galloway. You know, he's anti-NATO, we're anti-NATO. He's anti-Brexit, we're anti-Brexit. He's anti-trans ideology in the education system, we are that as well. And he's also a unionist, as in he wants Scotland to stay in the Union of Britain. So, you know, we do agree with him on some stuff. And, you know, we've got David Cluse, Unity News Network, very vocally anti-NATO, anti-war. But, you know, Putin was elected again, you know, yesterday or the day before, you know, and it does make me laugh when you get all these mainstream media types like Sky and BBC and whoever. They say, oh, these not fair elections. If Putin would do elections like we do, the bankers would just take over one of the parties and they would just get rid of him. It's like that's exactly what happened here. They've just taken over all the parties with the Friends of Israel groups, etc. And they control our politics. And this is why we're a slave to NATO, because the bankers run our country. And Putin doesn't want that. And that's why he won't allow Western-style democracy in his country. As simple as that. And, you know, his approval ratings are supposed to be very high. You know, who knows what the truth is. But, you know, I've seen Scott Ritter. You know, I don't know if people know who Scott Ritter is. He was a nuclear weapons inspector in Iraq, and he saw all the treachery through what NATO was doing and the fake story about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which ended up to be a massive war crime perpetrated by the West. And he speaks about Russia, and he's been there quite a lot. He's there quite a lot, and he says it's a great country. And you know, when the sanctions happened, like, oh, they got rid of McDonald's. Oh, what a shame! That's going to do the population a really bad health move there, isn't it? Like getting rid of McDonald's and things like that. So he says it's a very nice society, very clean, you know, very patriotic, very proud of their country. You know,
Christian, very Christian society.
Yes, and he's promoting Christianity. Apparently, he's built about 20,000 churches in the last few years, which is amazing. And I do believe that's one of the main reasons why NATO want to take Russia out, because Russia is the last major country left in Europe who are promoting Christianity. The other major countries, UK, France, Italy, Germany, Christianity's been removed by the communists, been taken out of the equation so they could take over our countries. And basically that's what's happened. So yeah, Scott Ritter, he's very interesting. Check him out on YouTube. He gives a very good in-depth analysis of the Ukraine conflict and the Gaza conflict. So yeah, I mean, you know, I just don't know what's going to happen. It's quite frightening, really, because like I said earlier, I think Israel are panicking because they know that America are not going to be able to protect them for much longer. That's why they're doing a smash and grab for this land, what they've just tried to do. And our government shouldn't be supporting it whatsoever. So I'll leave it over to you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. 159 people watching on the eye counter there. I just want to go a bit off at the moment. So, I mean, we've mentioned Galloway a couple of times, and guys, things are changing in the Northwest. Galloway's put shockwaves through Labour, the Tories, the Lib Dems, the Greens, who all are comfortable up here, and he's put shockwaves through them. And my mate Billy, Pack UK, you must have seen Nick Wilson in the chat. They've set up an independent group, and we're going to take out the councillors. One councillor in particular, we're going to start. But Billy's had a meeting with George Galloway, and he's told him who's responsible for leaving Rochdale to go in the dumps and stuff like that. And Galloway has done a little video, so he's had a meet with him, he's had a meet with someone else, and he's going to look into it and work with these people to bring Rochdale Council to account. And that's all that Billy has ever wanted. And it's not a Christian, it's not somebody with his politics that is going to support him. It's somebody without his politics. George Galloway is the exact opposite of what I thought Billy would be. But he's going to help Billy, and he's going to bring it to light, and he's a member of parliament, so he can put pressure on people. There's police that need investigating. There's ex-councillors and serving councillors that need investigating in Rochdale. And a lot of people in Oldham are quite thick, actually, because they think that Oldham is a separate thing. If it wasn't for the 3 girls scandal coming out, we would not have had the CSE scandal report of Oldham. And people in Oldham are very ignorant to how intimately linked these cases are. I'm not, because I studied them for years and I've talked about these things. It's not an issue with just one area. It's a national issue. And so this is coming into effect now. So there is change is going to be out, and the shockwave's gone through the Northwest. George Galloway said he's going after Andy Burnham's position. He wants to run a member of parliament in Angela Rayner's Ashton. And no doubt he'll be focusing on in Oldham, which will take votes off Labour and the Conservatives and give more of a chance for an independent or a small national party like ours to get some council seats. I don't know why people don't like realise this. So it's been really good. The elections are coming up soon. There's lots of stuff going on in Oldham. The Labour lot are calling the Tories all sorts of names in the chamber. They're all acting like big delinquent 15-year-old estate boys who haven't got nothing else to do. You know what I mean? So, you know, the council's breaking apart the seams, and there's been a lot of pressure on it. Last week they had another thing into the child sexual exploitation. More people voting for a thing, but all intimately linked, which gives us, the National Housing Party, more chance to get candidates in.
You know, when we had the anti-COVID movement, which I was very heavily involved with, and we had local organisations. We met in local halls. We had coalitions of people right across the political spectrum, and we mobilised people just to educate others and stop the propaganda, stop the media's bought, the politicians are bought. It's all lie, lie, lie. We had a big meeting at the Quakers meeting house in Liverpool, and I jumped on the stage and said, look, all these politicians, they're phonies. They're just lying to us through the teeth. They're a waste of time. We need locally dynamic groups that can challenge the status quo. I mean, you talked about George Galloway being a catalyst there for change in the Northwest. We need catalysts all over the place. And these people, you see, this what people don't realise, people just think, oh, this is all pie in the sky. This war is coming. It's coming a lot quicker than people realise. And we're going to need to mobilise local groups, which seasoned political activists, the people who've been involved with the National Housing Party or other political parties, will be required to organise these groups, because we're going to have to really mobilise to stop the globalist elite from pushing this country towards war. People think it's all surreal, it's all a dream. It's a lot closer than people realise. The Ukrainian army is effectively defeated now. Russia's on the march. China has turned totally against the West now and has allied itself with Russia. So this is a huge powerhouse now. Iran is in the picture. The Islamic world's in the picture. India, as Pat said, has looked both ways, but it's now, I mean, Modi's just congratulated Putin on winning the election. He said he supports Putin 100%. India will ally themselves with the powerhouse, which is Eurasia, because they look at the West and they look at the leaders of the West and they look at the West. All the West does is manipulate. It's got no agenda, no worthwhile agenda anymore. Because, as Pat just said, we've scuppered Christianity in the West. We've got no morals anymore. We've got no moral strength. We don't stand for what is right. Now, they keep saying, oh, this is a battle for democracy. We know there's no real democracy. You know, as Galloway always says, the Tories and the Labour, the two cheeks of the same backside. They're both a waste of time. And the Liberal Democrats, that's the, well, I mean, I think it's more Conservatives and Liberals are the two cheeks, and the hole in the middle is Keir Starmer, it's the Labour Party. That's where all the crap comes out of. But you see, so all we get in the West is lies, manipulation, and we're excluded now. The people are excluded from the political process. The elite just shuffle the pack. They shuffle the money between themselves. They shuffle the power and the seats of power between themselves, and they exclude the people. They're really resentful that we voted for Brexit, that we want to have sovereignty in this country. I mean, look at immigration. 80% of the people for the last 80 years have said no immigration. Yet the politicians have pushed it year after year, and it gets worse and worse. They've deliberately transformed our countries and taken them away from us. So we have to start asserting ourselves again. Now in America, we're seeing the MAGA army, the Trump army, and this really disturbs the globalist Zionist elite in Washington, because they don't like ordinary people asserting themselves. For them, we're just pawns in their game. As Bob Dylan said, you're only a pawn in their game. But we're not pawns. We're citizens. We've got a history. We belong to a nation. We're a people. We've got a proud tradition of freedom and liberty in this country. We've got a proud tradition of letting our voices be heard. We've got a proud tradition of holding the elite to account. We must have accountability. They can't go into, they're given, I mean, the British government have given 7 billion already to Zelensky, who's just like a gangster and running a mafia in Kiev. I mean, I could talk about the Ukraine and what happened in 2014 when the Americans engineered the Orange Revolution, the coup, and brought their people in to take over the Ukraine. It was all done by the CIA. Zelensky's just a placement. In 2016, in the election in the Ukraine, Zelensky was elected on the promise of peace and negotiations with Russia. Instead, he said, I'm going to join NATO and provoke the war instead. So we're being lied to, we're being conned all the time. Our money, as John said earlier, All they want to do is take our money and spend our money on their causes. But we've got to assert ourselves. Now, the National Housing Party, we've got a presence, as you can see, on social media. We've got a presence on Twitter, great meeting in Manchester 2 weeks ago. 15,000 people, John, have seen Pat's speech. Incredible, you know. But we're allying ourselves with other groups on the no to NATO side, the anti-woke agenda. They're going to try and take us back into the EU. That's another one of their strategies. Labour is just another facet of this globalist Zionist establishment, which is about manipulation and abusing the people. We need to, I mean, I'm really glad that George Galloway is going for Angela Rayner in Ashton-under-Lyne. And I'm really glad that, you know, he might even challenge Andy Burnham in Manchester. We need to challenge. The Labour Party offers no alternative, simply more of the same. In fact, it will get worse under Labour. Keir Starmer is woke. He's pro-immigration. He's pro-war. He's a Zionist fanatic. He's a real danger to the British people. I mean, Sunak is not even British. He hasn't got an ounce of British blood in his body. He doesn't even belong here. He said he wants to go and live in California before he became Prime Minister. Who are these people that are taking over our country? They're not taking our country in our interest. They're not patriots. They don't relate to the British people. They don't touch the grassroots. We're the grassroots, and we're rising up, and we're making an impact. Come and join us. Be a candidate in the local elections. Let's shake this nation. Let's shake it and make sure the elite will never, ever get the opportunity to conscript our youth and send them as cannon fodder to the Russian front. That's not going to happen because it's not in our interest, and it'll just end up with misery and suffering, and there'll be nothing come out of it. Nothing good will come out of it. There's nothing good comes out of the globalist Zionist elite. Nothing. That's why we're in rebellion. John?
Thank you. Honestly, thank you, guys. It's been awesome. 166 people watching. And I'll phone you back in a minute, Sarge. I will do. But yeah, good stuff. We've got some guests lined up and things to talk about. One thing I want to talk about, not next week, week after, is our leaders of our countries. It's looking like it's going to be a black guy going in as leader of Wales. Who has already took a £200,000 donation off somebody dodgy who pollutes the natural countryside, right? So, you know, and I don't believe he's fit for the position. I think he's a box ticker, to tell you the truth. But we've got Amos Yousaf, Sadiq Khan, Leo Varadkar, and this guy going in Wales. Honestly, it's not looking pretty for the UK, and these people don't have any loyalty, not like we have to the United Kingdom. I could trace my family back 22 generations in North Manchester, and Paul, no doubt he'll be able to trace his family back tons of generations, and so would a lot of us. But now we've got people who've been here 1 or 2 generations leading our countries and stuff like that, and it's just not right. And they don't care about us. If they did, Amos Yousaf won't be going on about Palestine all the time. If they cared about us, Leo Varadkar won't be trying to change the definition of a woman in Ireland. You know what I mean? These things are all wrong, and we've got the wrong leaders leading us. But thank you very much to the chat. There's been a lot of activity in the chat. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mark Williams. And I did see Craig. Thank you, Craig. I hope you're all right, brother. Pat did tell me something today, but I'll talk to you anyway. I'll phone you up tomorrow or something. But thank you to the mighty Paul Rimmer. We're on Bible class tomorrow. Pat won't be joining us, but I'll be setting it up, and I'll see everybody who's going to come on at 8 o'clock, and I'll be sending the email out with a link tomorrow evening as well. But thank you, Paul. Some powerful stuff there said in on that stream, and I think everyone's in agreement with what we've been talking about, more or less, and stuff. I'm sure that some of them might go a bit further, but yeah, a lot of them are in agreement. There was some comments like get the people conscripted who are new to the country so that they'll leave. That's what somebody said.
Anyway, guys, God bless you all. We shall
God bless everyone. Thank you very much,
No
guys.
surrender.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you now. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot, guys. And we'll catch you next week. Let me just give you who we got on next week. Let me just mention. Yeah, I've just got to mention who we've got on next week. And I will put a link up. I will put a link up. Sydney Jones, she's called, a media person, and she's part of the group Students Against Tyranny that James Harvey were in. And I did actually meet her the other week in Manchester. So we've got Sydney on next week. The week after, I'm hoping we can talk about our leaders of the countries, England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. I'm hoping we can talk about that. And also, my election's coming up, but I have got special guest from Oldham, Paul the Boots Uruk, who tried to go as tried to apply for chief executive in Oldham Council, and he's got some skills. But we're going to get Paul on as well soon. But thank you very much, everyone. Awesome stream. I can't believe how many people are watching. I'm sure that YouTube have given me a bit more freedom, because normally I'm very restricted. But thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Thank you. God bless you all.